Welcome back to Australian Mining's On the Bench, where we look at the hot button issues and topics that are affecting the mining industry. This week we'll be discussing mining and tax. Now this is an issue that re-emerges again and again, and lately it's come back up with a major inquiry into miners and how they handle their tax. Now Ben has been covering this, so Ben, what's been happening recently?
Well, the Senate inquiry into corporate tax avoidance came to a head earlier this month, and we've seen a lot of companies, not just mining companies, interviewed over this. But the 10th of April in Melbourne saw the major miners of Australia, BHP and Rio Tinto, and Fortescue from iron ore, and Adani and Glencore from coal, all fronting before the inquiry. And I mean, that's always a pretty historic event when you've got representatives from those companies all in the same room. The real heart of the issue is about the use of Singapore as a tax haven for profit shifting strategies.
Was this for all the miners or just a few of them really?
This is largely aimed at the iron ore. Well, actually no, Glencore have it as well. Adani doesn't have anything like that at the moment. But BHP copped the full brunt of the inquiry due to their reluctance to answer certain questions. Now, the issue is about the marketing hub, as BHP calls it, which is in Singapore, where BHP sells its own products to a subsidiary of the parent company, BHP Billiton PLC.
At a supposedly lowered price to kind of reduce the sales tax on their iron ore.
Well, this is the interesting thing. We don't quite know what BHP has been selling iron ore to itself for, what the rate has been. Is it lower than the market rate, or are they actually adding value on top of the market rate when they on-sell this stuff? They say that the marketing hub is for adding value, for dealing with their clients, that it's sort of a neutral region for their clients in Asia. But yeah, it seems to be largely used as a tax strategy, and all of the companies will steer well away from the term tax avoidance. I mean, this is perfectly legal what they're doing, and the figures that they've come back with seem pretty good. But Tony Cudmore, the President for Corporate Affairs with BHP, touted the company as one of the world's most, the world's most transparent mining company.
And that's a major thing at the moment, transparency and tax dealings. I mean, we're seeing all of the major companies, Google, Microsoft, they're all being called to for the way they deal with tax right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So BHP have come under the microscope. I mean, the other companies have as well, but the reluctance of Cudmore and the head of group tax, Jane Mitchie, to actually answer questions brought full focus on them.
So this differed from the way that the other miners really approached it. Was there a lot more transparency, you would say, or at least in regards to the inquiry? Well,
Rio Tinto were asked what sort of profits go through. They actually don't like to call it a marketing hub. They call it a commercial centre.
Okay.
Which seems to be the same sort of thing. And Fortescue, who were asked almost no questions at all at the inquiry and really did escape any sort of scrutiny, they call it a small shipping office. So Fortescue don't actually profit shift through that office. It's just used for shipping, apparently. So the questions that Cudmore refused to answer, the first was about how much profit actually goes through the Singapore hub. Now, the answers came back on Monday, and from 2006 to 2014, BHP have earned $5.6 billion, US $5.6 billion in profits through that hub. So that's over 8 years. Now, BHP say that they have, actually 58% of that marketing hub is owned by BHP Billiton in Australia. The remaining 42% is owned by BHP Billiton PLC. So BHP say that they have paid tax on 58% of those profits. Now, the interesting thing is that Singapore don't charge them very much tax at all. And the key question of the inquiry was, how much tax are you paying in Singapore? Well, the answer is 0.002%. It amounts to about 15,000 US a year, which is actually less than it's less than you and I pay tax.
Most definitely. So really, I mean, compare that to what they'll be paying in Australia, which would be 30% or so?
30% they say, and it does work out to about that much. They say that they've paid 945 million Australian. It gets a bit hard, gets a little bit sticky to work out the figures when you're dealing with American profits in American dollars and then tax in Australian dollars, because obviously the rate's been changing. Like, we've gone from parity down to 70 cents. So yeah, these figures seem to add up. The discrepancy, the 42% that goes to BHP Billiton PLC, the amount that no tax would be paid, or not much tax is paid on, is about 700 million for the same period. So actually not a whole lot of money over 8 years.
Comparing it to the part that's actually coming across to Australia.
Yeah, exactly. But the second line of questioning that Cudmore refused to answer, and the answers that came back on Monday, taken on notice, was the amount that the Australian Tax Office is pursuing BHP for at the moment, which turned out to be 301 million that they want for them.
Okay.
The interesting thing about that is that they want interest too. And the interest on that 301 million is $145 million.
So any word from the tax office on how they actually figured out that interest rate? Because that interest rate works out to about just short of 50% or so, doesn't it?
That has not been reported on yet as far as I've seen.
Okay.
But they're also claiming 76 million in penalties off BHP. So obviously they're strenuously denying that they owe the tax office that money. They will dispute it to the full extent that they can. And yeah, we'll see how that pans out.
So really, I mean, this issue of tax emerges again and again, and is calling for greater transparency across globally at the moment. So it'll be interesting to see how this pans out with the inquiry, and I guess the push by the Greens late last year following the issues with Glencore and the Fairfax claims of overtax. So I guess we just have to wait and see.
Well, the call in Parliament is for, and however unlikely this might sound to some people, the call is for legislation that can stop companies from profit shifting. Joe Hockey talked about this earlier in the year. Obviously, he's got a lot to think about with royalties going through the floor from iron ore, which is going to chop a massive hole in the budget, the upcoming budget. But Hockey did mention that it would take an international solution. It would take cooperation from other countries, chiefly Singapore in the case of iron ore, to actually find a solution to this profit shifting problem. But is it really that much of a problem if it's 700 million over 8 years that BHP have managed to skip out on? It doesn't sound like a whole lot.
No, I mean, this was brought up at one of the G8 or G20 forums. So it looks like something that is going to happen globally eventually when these governments make a decision. But the actual numbers, I mean, 700 million over 8 years, really.
I think the key issue is that, and especially for our readers, a lot of people understand that companies have to do what they legally can to save all the tax dollars possible. They need to increase their profits for their shareholders, for the ongoing health of the company.
Keeping people employed.
But the thing that other people have to realise is that the Australian government needs to do exactly the same thing. The Australian government needs to get every tax dollar it can to keep this company running. Country running, bit of a Freudian slip there. Joe Hockey is well within his rights to pursue, and it's his duty to pursue means of preventing profit shifting to ensure every dollar from our resources stay in this country.
So as I said, we'll just have to wait and see how this really pans out, but it'd be an interesting thing to follow. Thanks very much, Ben.
Thanks, Cole.
So if you want to find out more about what's happening, you can subscribe to our channel here, and don't forget to visit our site, miningaustralia.com.au, to keep up with what's happening in the industry. Thanks very much for watching.
Thanks.